Learn something new every minute of the day now. Thank you. So next up, last up, but certainly by no means least up, is a good friend of mine. I've been looking for an opportunity to work on a project with these guys for quite some time and still haven't quite got there. Maybe this year, I hope so. But I have seen their work many times, and we wanted to touch on the subject of visual effects for the giant screen. Now, I decided to kind of reach slightly outside of what would regard as the giant screen space. However, these guys do have experience in the giant screen space, working on Mysteries of the Unseen World, for instance, doing a few VFX scenes there. But over the years, worked on a number of Hollywood productions, a number of large format dome productions too. We have Greg Downing of xRez, otherwise known as Iron Man, for his super high-tech skills. So, shall I come up and... Have you got a mic there? I'll hand this one over to you, so I know it works. They're quite close talk ones, actually. They're quite close talk.
Oh, I gotta hold it. Okay. You got me? I guess so. Okay, maybe it'll even work from the mic stand. All right, you all can hear me now? Okay, great. Thanks so much. So I'll talk a little bit about our VFX work, some of the stuff we've done specifically for large format, for giant screen, but also for other immersive media types. So we've been working in the area of visual effects and computational photography for the last 8 years. We're based in Santa Monica, California, at the Santa Monica Airport. We initially started our company doing gigapixel photography. So this was a method to combine lots of images to create an extremely high resolution image. But we work in a lot of disparate markets. We work a lot doing a lot of very technical innovation, but combining that with design towards the goal of expressing stories of natural history and the sciences. So our background is in feature film, full dome, and giant screen visual effects. Principally, we were background artists in VFX, and we developed a bunch of special techniques for real-world terrain acquisition. So Eric and I are both big into the outdoors, and one night we were out camping, and I was working at Sony ImageWorks at the time, and I think I was on Spider-Man 3 or something like that, and I was like, here I am once again building New York City only to blow it up again. Am I going to spend my entire career doing nothing but building and blowing up New York? And Eric says, oh, that's nothing. I've built it and blown it up 3 times. And we were just talking amongst ourselves and saying, these are incredibly powerful tools, and yet all we do is kind of build and blow up the same city over and over again. So let's see if we can use these to do something powerful. If we looked at what happened with photography and how photography has changed the world, that's something that visual effects hadn't really done. So we wanted to kind of focus our efforts to see what we could do to make the world a better place through our work. So we decided to, kind of direct our VFX skills towards more meaningful projects. Not to say that the film world, pure entertainment was a lot of fun. There was a whole lot of fun there. These are some of the visual effects and giant screen projects that we've done over the years. I'm sure you'll recognize a few of these. So a lot of what we were doing was bringing these tools to the natural world, and we're also both big into the outdoors and exploring. So that was our the natural place that we wanted to find. But we started our company with gigapixel photography. So the gigapixel photography is basically you take a it's stitching panoramas, same way you might stitch panoramas on your phone. The difference being that we use a longer lens so that we can collect more resolution. When you put a longer lens on the camera, you're taking more photographs, but ending up with more overall resolution. So we repurposed a motion control rig to shoot gigapixel images. And you see a spherical pattern that we designed in Maya here. And here you see a more of a forward-facing traditional rectilinear type of view. And this was our first gigapixel image. So this one's 2.6 gigapixels. So this was our first spherical output. Now, we weren't the very first people to do this. There were probably 4 or 5 other people around the world who had been doing gigapixel photography. But we all kind of faced the same problem, is that there wasn't an easy way to share these things. It took about an hour to open them in Photoshop. This is our second image, and just as a comparison, we've put several other formats that you are all familiar with, so you get an idea of what the scale of those images are. And the first image that kind of let our company take off and let us start a company was when we figured out how to get this stuff online. Google Maps API came out, and it kind of dawned on me that, hey, I could just break my image up into 100,000 tiles the way they do with the map tiles, and I could use this to get the images online. So as soon as we got it online, we had the good fortune of becoming kind of an internet phenomenon, and we had 17,000 people come in the first half hour and shut down not only our server, but our ISP went down. And they were all looking at this image, which is kind of a voyeuristic image of Boston. And we've gone through lots of iterations with this. Now there's lots of heads dedicated specifically to making gigapixel work. These are some of the robots and some of the manual rigs that we use to do it in different lenses. And we've always focused on making sure that our gear is portable, so we can always bring these types of projects to interesting places. Here we can see some more tripod-oriented rigs. And these are, now there's a plethora of players for this. There's tons and tons of ways to share this type of information on the web and in rendering. So we kind of took this idea, and being VFX artists, we wanted to kind of start integrating VFX into this new kind of gigapixel technology. So we started working on hybrids. So we often work with digital elevation models, which are 3D models of the Earth, of different terrain. So we were starting to bring these in and starting to explore 2.5D imagery, where we would align the 3D model with the photograph to get some special effects. And we could also reproject these spherical images so that you could do things like change the composition of the spherical image in post. So we also combine this with another technology that's related, which is called photogrammetry, which is reconstructing the 3D world from photographs. So we would use this to change depth of field, dimensionalize 2D images so that we could fly into them. And then eventually we're able to start using the advancements in photogrammetry to start to do much more advanced things. So just the idea of recomposition, we can take any spherical or fisheye or any other type of image, and you can change the projection. So I think a question came up earlier about going from a fisheye to a rectilinear image. That's a very simple transformation. So if you want to extract rectilinear views from your dome images, that's something certainly we could talk about. In any case, so we would take an image using a head like this to shoot a panorama with no parallax. It rotates around the entrance pupil, which is a point where there's no parallax inside the lens. We'd stitch that together into a seamless spherical view like you see here. And then we could bring that into Maya, into a 3D program, and get the spherical nature back to the photograph. And then we're free to recompose the photography for this. So this is something that we employed in the full dome market because it allowed us to take a spherical image and then create all of our pans, our tilts, all of our camera motion could come in post rather than at the time of capture. Now this is an example of the DEMs, or digital elevation models. These were originally captured by the space shuttle using radar tomography. Now they're captured by planes using photography and laser scanners and all kinds of different technologies. But basically it's a terrain map. It's a 3D terrain map. So we'd take one of our gigapixel images, like you see up above here, and we'd align it with that geometry, which you see below. And that would allow us to do some kind of interesting things from a VFX perspective. This allowed us to do things like flood an environment and actually get accurate shore integration. This is where the shore really would interact in the Owens Valley if it did flood. So we get that proper shore interaction here. And here on the right, we can see proper shadow draping as we put CG clouds into the environment. So it allowed us to re-weather these scenes. We've also combined this with other techniques, such as time-lapse. So we'll take these 3D terrain models and we'll put them behind time-lapse and then project the time-lapse onto that model. That then allows us to do things like move the camera in post. So in this case, we were trying to create what would be a nearly impossible camera move, shooting a time-lapse with a 200mm helicopter shot into this mountain, into Mount Whitney. So a lot of this work naturally lent itself to full dome production. There's a lot of problems that are inherent in full dome production. The principal one being that there is not a physically accurate camera that's been available to produce full dome content. Full dome content typically is 4K by 4K. Now there's lots of 4K cameras out there, but there aren't a lot of cameras that are 4K by 4K that you can stick a fisheye lens on and get an accurate full dome image. You can do it with stills, but it's really hard to do in full motion. So these limitations kind of created an opportunity for us because we were working in environments, extending environments. So it allowed us to use both the CG components and the photography components. So we would do things like dimensionalize spherical photography. We'd use photogrammetry, and we would also stitch and embed video. So we would do multiple stitched video segments in order to create something that was high enough resolution and had enough wrap for the full dome environment. So we've done a lot of that and a lot of specialized camera arrays. Now here's some of our work that's showing up on the hill at the Griffith. This is an image of Tikal. Here's an image from the Denver Planetarium doing a panorama show. These are various pieces that we've done for the full dome market. And we also created a short film called Crossing Worlds that won us a Domi Award one year. This is from a film called Supervolcanoes. Now I'll break out here to show you just a little breakdown of that. This is called the Grand Prismatic. And I don't think we have audio, do we? So we start off here with a gigapixel photograph so that we wouldn't run out of resolution. And we laid out a plane for dimensionalization and dropped in some 3D elements that we would get parallax from. And the story we were trying to express here was exactly how close you are to the lava when you visit the Grand Prismatic. And what you see here is actually it's all based on real data for the prismatic. And you can see that you don't have to go too far before you hit the lava plume. It looks like it might be closer than your car is parked. Something to keep in mind if you visit there. But then we're able to do this to really express the scale of that lava plume. What's that? Real data. So another tool that we use a lot is photogrammetry. So this is an emerging technology. It's actually been around for a long time, the idea of taking measurement from photographs. This was done early in photography, but from a computer graphics, as a computer graphics term, it's only been around for a short time. And it's been going through a massive change in the last 4 years or so, as a lot of it has become automated. It's, in many cases, replacing what people have done with laser scanners, in that you can create automatic 3D point clouds. You can also create survey-grade data using photogrammetry. And the method basically requires that you take a lot of photographs from different perspectives. And these witness photographs allow us to reconstruct the environment. So there's a few limitations to it that you consider. Usually your lighting is baked because the texture is coming from the photography. So you get a 3D model as a result, but the lighting is usually baked into the model. There is some promising research that may not always be the case. And then you bring it into your 3D program to create the animation. So we saw this as having huge potential for giant screen and full dome. We used this on the IMAX production of Magnificent Desolation. This is something that we did for Sassoon Film. So this is some of the production shots there. I think we've got Sean Phillips there looking through the lens. And most of the live action components were all shot on set. And this is a recreation of the Hadley Ryle, is what we did for the show. And we were able to get really high resolution scans of the photography that the astronauts took when they were on the moon. And they walked up to the edge of the Hadley Ryle and took photographs. So we had two views of the Hadley Ryle. We were able to take that photography and map that out to the 3D geometry to fly the camera through there. So we were able to create the stereo from this generated 3D model. Here are some images. Here's the model unshaded, and here it is with a fully textured and lit model. Now, photogrammetry is something that we use on most of our projects now. Here we've got, we did a small art film for Full Dome, and we worked with another artist, and we gave him detailed instructions on how to take the photographs. And he wandered around inside this cave and took all the photographs necessary to reconstruct a 3D environment. And you can see the light blue lines here is the mesh detail. We also went and photographed some bristlecone pines. We took that 3D model and converted it to particles so that we could have the tree appear inside the cave, and we treated it for the fine art experience. And the particles then we were able to blow around using wind. But we also use photogrammetry not only for these kinds of natural environments, but it's all something that also works for hard surface. It's a little more work to create man-made type structures using photogrammetry, but it certainly works well when you take the time and effort to do it. This is a piece that we did as part of Earthquakes, which is a Full Dome film that came out of the California Academy of Sciences. And this is the ferry building in San Francisco. So we have a fly-through of the ferry building. Now, some of the projects that we did, we ran into some problems with photogrammetry. This is a project that we did for a major feature film, and we wanted to recreate Waimea Canyon in Kauai for fly-through. So I went out to photograph this, and I took about 1,500 photographs to create this very detailed model with a gigapixel resolution texture on the model. To capture this, I stood out on the skids of the helicopter, and the helicopter flew up and down the canyon. I took lots of photos. The trouble that we ran into is that they finally got the funding to do the film in the rainy season, and so we had lots of trouble with weather. We sat on the ground for 2 weeks, and we had 2 half-hour openings in which to capture all the photographs. So I spent most of the time in the lobby with Ron Goodman from SpaceCam talking about how difficult this problem was. So this is something that he and I worked on together as an idea to get the photogrammetry very rapidly. So this was a project that we designed together. Sadly, this has never been built. We did get, well, it's a long story, but there was a small disaster in Japan that kind of spoiled the whole thing. In any case, this is another project that we've used photogrammetry for. We recently, Autodesk has created a lot of really nice photogrammetry software. And we'll typically walk around with poles. We also did some experimentation with them, kind of exploring the integration of traditional laser scanning technology with photogrammetry. So that's why you see a laser scanner in the foreground. And we use this to create a little short for them. Let me break out and show you some of these models so you can see kind of how it was captured. Lots of high-angle photographs. And let me jump through here to Maya. So here you can see a resulting model. So you can see we get a pretty detailed. Now you also notice that I'm running through this, spinning it in real time. So this is one of the wonderful benefits of photogrammetry, is that you get super, super fast rendering because there is no lighting calculation. All the lighting is baked into the surface. So this is a very powerful technique for terrains like this. Also for a lot of cultural heritage sites, it's a very powerful technique. And just so that you can understand how we shot it, I'll go ahead and turn on the cameras here. So we often use carbon fiber poles. We have these 20-foot poles that we walk around with our cameras, and we trigger them remotely so that we can get all the high-angle photographs necessary to create our geometry.
How long did it take to capture that, Greg?
That, I would say, was probably under 20 minutes. Yeah, not too long. And we use this to capture a piece for Autodesk that they used to create all the demonstrations for Maya 2015. So they kind of explain how to use all the tools in Maya 2015 within this environment we created. We created our own kind of short piece from this. Let me show that to you here. So we had a little fun with this. We decided to change the scale of that environment. And the skies you see in the background, those are all the real skies that we captured on location using a fisheye time lapse. So we get a wonderful little Sierra wave here in the background that you can see going on. So this is all at Mono Lake. So again, these structures are really only maybe 3 feet tall. but we just changed the scale to create an entire terrain out of these very small features. Now we've also rendered this out for full dome. So if you find yourself at the Fisk in Colorado, you can see this in 8K in that theater. Of course, we also get stereo for free when we do this, so that's not too difficult. We also have this rendered for the Oculus Rift. Once we capture the environment, we can then render out the complete environment spherically and stereoscopically. One of the very powerful things about photogrammetry is that if we're taking lots and lots of close-up photos of a subject, we can end up with an enormous amount of texture resolution. So often rendering out to extremely large formats is not too big of a deal for us. Actually, I shouldn't say not too big of a deal. It is a big deal to render it, but we have the data in that we can get there. Now, a lot of what we're doing now is capturing using drones. So this is the drone that we use. This is a 3D Robotics X8. This allows us to carry a 36 megapixel camera. So this is what we're using currently on most of our projects. But we still use helicopters when we can. This is a project that we did with an organization called Glacier Works. Now, Glacier Works approached us. They were doing rephotography of photography that was taken 100 years ago to better understand how much the glaciers are melting, because a good portion of the world is dependent on those glaciers for water, for growing food, and for all of the water. So there's 7 of the major rivers of Asia are all based on this glacier ice melt from the Himalaya. What they've discovered so far, just from the rephotography, is that over the last 100 years, the glaciers have melted 98 meters, which is a lot because it's kind of like a martini glass, all the volumes at the top. But when we spoke with the founder of this organization, and he described to us that he was trying to measure the glaciers, we said, we've got a much better way than just rephotography to get a baseline for how much volume is being lost year to year, and that's using these photogrammetric techniques. So we designed a rig for his helicopter that he took around. He flew, taking over 100,000 photos of the Everest region, creating the most detailed 3D model of those glaciers that have ever been made. And that'll be a baseline for future projects to measure how much they've actually melted, because we can measure the volume from that. Now, this is one way that we can also extract stereo using these techniques. We can use a combination of these techniques of both using the trained models but also photogrammetry to get stereo images. So we did some of this for Mysteries of the Unseen World. So we shot some time-lapse for Mysteries, and here's some production photos. And let me just show you a little breakdown. So here we're revealing the geometry. So this was taken in Yosemite, and we used the model that, oops, let me just back up a bit there, scrub that back. So we started off stationary, but we wanted the camera to lift up into the air. So we used a 3D model, a DEM of that, and we projected that camera's view onto that 3D terrain, and then we generated the second eye from that as well. Now this was all for Sean Phillips, and we also shot and Jenny Durr at Days End. And so we had plates that we shot of this freeway shot as well. but we wanted to extend it, and we also wanted the camera to lift up. So this is another VFX shot of that. And then we just had a simple evening shot with motion control. Now, in the middle of the summer, we did a project with Bjork. So this is a show that, that just opened. Bjork is doing she's got a new installation that's at the MoMA in New York. And there was a piece that was, in addition to kind of a retrospective of all the work that she's done so far, they also wanted a custom media installation that was different from all of the music videos that she's done over time. So this was for a piece from her new album. So we went out there for the location scout, and so we explored lots of different options, lots of different caves and terrains around Iceland, exploring these for potential locations. The story of the album is about a wound she received in her divorce. And so all the locations were physical representations of this wound theme. So here we can see, this ended up being one of the major locations in this small cavern back here, or excuse me, small ravine. And here's the ravine from the back. So in some of the locations, we had two locations. One was a ravine and one was a cave. So the cave was a very low light experience, wet surfaces that didn't work quite as well with photogrammetry, so we relied more heavily on laser scanning there. But we combined both technologies in both locations. This is just a beautiful piece of data that we got from the laser scans of the ravine location. This might be a little more informative for what that 3D point cloud looked like. And this is the photogrammetric result. So this is what we got using photogrammetry with the full photographic textures. And this is a higher overview of that. So when we captured this both with handheld photography, down at ground level, terrestrial photography, and we were able to solve that in the same photogrammetric solution as the drone-based photography that we did. Here are all the cameras that were used in this solution. So the goal here was to match the live action photography that they were shooting with a RED camera. So they had a 6K RED camera. They wanted to match 6K textures where the camera was about 2 feet from the surface. And they wanted this for the whole area that Bjork traveled as they filmed her. So this had a very high requirement for resolution, which is why you see so many cameras. So this was all using the 36 megapixel A7R camera for the aerials and a 5D Mark III for all the terrestrial photography. And this is the cave location. So this is the result of the laser scan. And this is the result of the photogrammetry, so you actually get some of the color information here. Now the one thing that we don't get from the photogrammetry or the laser scan is all of the specular. The specular components get baked into the surface, so that was something that turned out to be a pretty tricky element in here, and this is why we needed to have both laser scanning and photogrammetric solutions because they supported one another. The photogrammetry gave us the perfect textures, but we couldn't link up the chunks we had done with the photogrammetry without the laser scans. We also shot HDRI along that project. And this is the final location that was, or the final result that was decided on, is doing, this is not, I think this is a render, this is not the final output. It's wider than this. It's a very wide angle of view, and it's 2 screens. So it's 2 screens facing one another. So for a lot of the work, they have a forward-facing camera that was live action, and they parented a CG camera to that so that when you look behind you at the second screen, it's actually moving exactly with the front-facing camera. So we basically, the front-facing camera was tracked, and we parented a CG camera rendering from our photogrammetric data for the backside. Now, this project went through lots and lots of changes and iterations. So the first thing we did when we got involved in the project, early on the plan was for this to be a full dome production that was going to occur in the museum. So the idea was that the immersion was going to be full dome. And so for that we did a test to explain our idea about how to do this for full dome. So we went out to the desert, we did a terrain capture using our usual technique of poles and just walking around taking photographs of the environment to create the 3D model of the terrain. We then took a 5D Mark III with the Magic Lantern hack so that we could shoot in RAW and a MoV, and we photographed a Bjork-sized actor walking through the terrain. We then tracked that video footage into that 3D model. So then we were able to combine that 3D model with the extension from the photogrammetry. So the problem we were trying to overcome was that there was not a camera that could get the resolution that we wanted, have live action, and the complete environment. So this allowed us to kind of combine all 3 of these elements and create a singular output that was consistent. And this is it inside of a dome, of course. So you can understand the spherical nature a little better. Yeah, we separate, that's right. That's right. So another project that's very similar that we did is a project called Time. So this is a project that we did with 2 artists, with Ai Weiwei, who is a well-known Chinese dissident artist, and a Navajo artist. So this was and you can see the Navajo artist's work here. This is his main work. He works, he does very temporal work. It's site-specific temporal work. So he works often in fire and sculpting. And Ai Weiwei is well-known for his ceramics work. And this is the location. So this was a very small event, very small number of people, invitation-only type of thing, on remote Navajo land, which is the main reason that there was a small number of people there. But it was a major art event. They wanted to share it with the rest of the world. So they commissioned us to create an art piece that would document what happened at this event. So what we've got here is we've got this urn that's filled with combustibles and traditional Navajo mandalas and forms surrounding it that were outlined in fire. And then we have Ai Weiwei's piece here in the foreground, which is his response to the Navajo work, only it's made from bicycles, what made Chinese famous. And it's coal that was collected from the site that was on the Navajo land, and then Ai Weiwei crushed ceramic urns, traditional Chinese ceramic urns, and then created the bicycle pattern from that. And we went out and filmed it on location the night of the event. My malware is not up to date here. And we created a full dome piece from this. So here's some imagery. We also flew drones over the property so that we collect a photogrammetric model. We tracked in the video footage camera into that model as well that allowed us to land our virtual camera exactly in the position the video was taken from. So we could use the video for the front-facing portion and then just extend it using the photogrammetric result. Was opened or premiered at Art Basel. It also it's also in the Native American Indian Art Museum in New Mexico. And also played at one of the Navajo, the dome was placed on some Navajo land to display it to the Navajos. We also created a flat version, a version for the dome, and a version for the Oculus Rift. So what we found is that kind of once you author for a spherical environment, you have lots of opportunities to go out to lots of other media types. Now, our latest project is an independent project that we're doing called VR Traveler, which is a virtual reality sampler. And we have this with us. We have a 90-second experience that is a teaser of these different VR experiences. So each of these VR experiences will eventually be a 7-minute experience that you can download from the Oculus Store. So it works very much like the Apple App Store. And you can download these experiences. You pay a few dollars for the experience. And you can download it to your VR headset and kind of go to the place. So we've got Everest, we've got fantasy locations, we've got locations in Iceland. So if any of you are interested in viewing this, both Eric and I have our Rifts with us, the portable version, which is the Gear VR. So if you want to take a look, just grab Eric or I, and we'd be happy to show you. All right, thank you.
2, 3, 2, 3. Fantastic, super cool stuff. It's the future. And not a single piece of celluloid was hurt in the making of any of those pieces. Any questions, anybody, before we go to for Greg? James.
So when you're out capturing all these terrain maps and stuff like that, do you have some special method or technique to make sure that you don't get back and find, oh, we left out a great big hole here and we don't have an image from this section? How do you make sure you capture everything you really need?
It's a mix. So for the flights, there's flight planning software that you can use to guarantee that you don't miss any sections. But that's not a 100% solution, and it doesn't work for the terrestrial photography. I worked on the original image modeler software, which was like one of the first commercial packages for doing this. So I've been working in photogrammetry for about 12 years. And what I've learned is that when you have a contoured, there's some things that'll be really easy and anyone can do. You have something that's relatively flat and not a lot of contours to it, it's going to be really simple. Flying over terrains is kind of like that. It's fairly simple. But once you're down on the ground, making sure that you get enough coverage is a mental exercise where you are keeping track in your head of areas that you've mapped, because you cannot map anything that is not in at least 2 photographs. So it's not that you just have 1 photograph. It has to be photographed from 2 perspectives, preferably 3 to 5. Yeah, and
he's a smart guy.
After a little experience, you get good at it. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. It looks like it works obviously brilliantly for solid organics like rocks and terrain.
Yes.
Does it also work well for trees, plants, flowers in a space? Could you create a virtual world?
If your tree has no leaves, it might work moderately. It does not work good for foliage. So what we do when we build a terrain is we'll use this for all the kind of solid parts of the terrain. If you're viewing it from a distance, the vegetation's okay, but once you get close, vegetation doesn't work. So what we do is we cull out all the vegetation and we replace it with CG vegetation if the camera's coming close.
Cool. Any other immediate questions? Thank you, Greg. Thank you very, very much. Round of applause, please.